John? John?
Oh, she's
We need you? Okay.
Are you giving us a red card? Do we have to leave now?
Yeah, those are the VIP cards.
That's right.
I have the floor. All right. Okay, thank you for having me. I just want to say that when I was writing my chapter for David Shackleton's book, Daughters of Feminism, had to come to terms with. The first one was my own inaction. For a long time, I had been aware of feminist ideology seeping into every aspect of life, from education to news media to politics, and I knew that itself was fundamentally anti-male. Its foundation is based on male blaming, and therefore it serves as a justification for male hating. Now, in my chapter, I considered the gender discourse to be something like a swarm of flies buzzing outside my window screen, something that probably didn't really bode well as to what was really out there outside my window, but it was fairly easy for me to ignore. I had more pressing concerns. And I guess at that time, there really wasn't much I could have personally done about the situation. I was just a mother of 3 plus 2, resource town with no internet for most of my time there, and always too much month left at the end of the money. So I wasn't really in a position to do anything. And the conditions in which I would eventually become able to do something, those were years away from coming into being. You know, fast, cheap internet, inexpensive technology, social media platforms that both made information available to me, put that together into a message to put out for the world. But the second and more difficult thing that I have had to come to terms with that really came home when I was writing that chapter was the inaction of pretty much everybody else. Certainly, I've met a lot of really passionate advocates for men and boys over the last 8 years, plenty of ordinary people who agree that something should be done to help men and boys or to rein in the excesses of our toxic gender discourse. But there's just a real sense of urgency that's lacking in the cultural zeitgeist when it comes to men's issues. This is not only about the feminist positioning of men as the privileged oppressor class who designed and maintained the whole system for their own unearned benefit. That obviously doesn't help. But because why would people who are not only playing life on the easy setting, but who are doing so at the expense of everyone else, why would they deserve the help of society? It's also about the traditional role of men as providers and protectors. They are supposed to be helping and saving the rest of us, don't you know? They aren't the appropriate society's compassion, protection, or concern. They're the people who are supposed to take those impulses that we feel about others and make them fruitful through meaningful action. That's what men are supposed to do. So if they can't help themselves, then how can they fulfill their role to help and provide and rescue others? So even when people agree with our concerns, it's really difficult to get them to care. And by care, I don't mean just holding the opinion that something should be done. By care, I mean feeling strongly enough about it to spend time, effort, and money on it to make things better. By care, I mean feeling strongly enough about it to put it at the top of your priority list, to make it a must-have rather than a, yeah, that would be nice item. By care, I mean being willing to march or to volunteer or to put an organization like CAFE or the Canadian Centre for Men and Families right up there with the Kidney Foundation and the Humane Society on your regular list of charitable donations. By care, I mean demanding our politicians consider the impact on men and boys of their legislation and policies the way they do currently for women and girls. Otherwise, we'll find someone else to vote for who will do that. By care, I mean being willing to risk being widely mocked, smeared, demonized, or called a misogynist, or a nut job, or a whiner. By care, I mean being willing to lose your job, or being willing to make this your job. It's really difficult to get people to care about the problems of men, or even boys, to that degree, which is why those of us who do care, those of you in this room that I'm looking at right now over Skype, that's why we're so important. It's why CAFE is so important, and it's why the Canadian Centre for Men and Families is so important. You know, I hope that the primary goal of CCMF is to one day secure significant government funding to help provide necessary services to men in crisis and their families and loved ones. I hope that the primary goal of CAFE is to one day secure enough public support that they won't have to operate on a shoestring, mostly with the help of volunteers, and that politicians will one day have to consider CAFE's position on men's issues before enacting legislation or implementing policy. I want these organizations to be taken seriously, and I hope that one day they will. But that day, if it ever comes, it might be a long way off. And until such time, it's up to those of us here who care about these issues to the degree that such care is required to make them better, right? It's up to us to make this endeavor work with whatever help we can find. And this is a true grassroots enterprise. This is a true anti-establishment endeavor. It's a truism in fiction that there are only 7 stories out there, only 7. Every single fiction plot falls roughly into the 7 basic story arcs. Now, compassion for men, just because they're men, that's not one of them. It simply doesn't sell to the mass market, at least not yet. But organizations like CAFE and enterprises like CCMF, those give me hope that this plot, it might actually one day become one of the stories, and that it will maybe, just maybe, have a happy ending. Thank you.
So you mentioned that you're hoping that we are looking for government subsidies to sort of help us in our programs and whatnot. I'd like to throw you a bit of a challenge on this. The difficulty I have with that, I would much rather have the funds coming from the private people giving donations and whatnot as opposed to government, so as to not become a puppet of the government. Can you react to that, please?
I would agree with you that I would always prefer that the sort of the free market take care of things, for sure. But as long as the counter narrative, the narrative that men are oppressors, that men are in charge, that men are in control of everything, that they unjustly benefit at the expense of women, all of those things, as long as that's the government mandated sort of, I guess, their policy, that's essentially the position that they're coming from. That's their worldview. And that's why these women's groups get so much funding. And they don't just get funding to help women. They get funding in order to essentially block our advocacy. So when you're looking at that one protest, the Warren Farrell protest back from in November 2014, some of those protesters were there as part of their women's studies program. Right. And that protest was sponsored and endorsed by the Canadian Union of Public Employees. So these are large, we are up against the establishment. And so I guess, like I would be very, very happy if all of this stuff was removed from under the rubric of government. But I don't see that happening. I see what we can do maybe is to wiggle our foot in the door there and actually get a little bit of something from the system and get into the system that way, and maybe try to shift some of those policies and some of those politics. So, I mean, we're not going to get the gender relationship or the gender discourse out of government. That's just not possible. The only option I think that we have is to get our side of the conversation in there. So, and then maybe removing it from the aegis of government would be the next step. But I don't see operating entirely outside of government as helpful, because you look at Bill C-51. That's a bill it's passed. It's passed both readings in Parliament. It's stalled in the Senate right now. It's an egregiously anti-male bill, and unless we have somebody in government actually adding our voice to that debate that's occurring within government and within the Senate, then that's going to pass. So we to have a voice in our government and a say in our government.
Women in front to get any bill passed in the government. Like for example, Bill M163, it's women, peace and security, because they couldn't get the peace initiative or the Department of Peace, so they can't go to get the ambassador for peace with a $20 million allocation. So I would suggest that we will appoint an ambassador who has experience, a politician, to get the cause and talk to the MPs. So that way it will be very effective. Thank you.
Well, I mean, it's one thing to talk to government. It's another thing to get them to listen. Like in the UK, Philip Davies, he's a Conservative MP. He's been very, very outspoken on men's issues. He spoke at the 2016 International Conference on Men's Issues on the gender justice gap, or the gender sentencing gap, whichever you want to call it. But he's just been an absolute bulldog in terms of trying to get men's issues on the table in Parliament and in the, up for debate. Things like male suicide, which is the largest killer of men under 49 in the UK right now. It's the highest, it's the biggest avoidable cause of death of men under 49 right now. And I mean, he was laughed at for trying to essentially propose a debate on men's issues for International Men's Day a few years ago by a feminist MP named Jess Phillips. And she held herself up as the victim of a campaign of harassment for being called on laughing at men's issues. She literally said, yeah, when I have parity here in government, then you can have your debate on men's issues. Now, women's issues in the UK Parliament are debated the third Thursday, I believe, of every single month. And then they have an entire day devoted to women's issues on International Women's Day. So, and she said, oh, the idea that men don't have a voice in Parliament is ridiculous. And he said quite plainly, there's a difference between men being able to speak in Parliament and speaking about men's issues in Parliament. But she just absolutely wouldn't hear of it. And she was sitting on the committee that inevitably made the decision to do that. And she got so much public blowback from her insensitivity, I guess, on these issues, particularly seeming to laugh at when he brought up the rate of male suicide, that they eventually did get their debate. But it's a really, really, really difficult slog through to even get anybody to listen to these issues within government. But I think it needs to be done. Government are the ones who legislate. They're the ones who decide policy. If we don't have somebody there speaking for us, and we do need more people there speaking for us, then absolutely they're going to pass whatever is best for women, particularly with the in Canada with the minister responsible for women, the status of women. They have a tremendous veto power in terms of even what information is exchanged between government departments. And so we're looking at having to try to get something similar up in government, because I don't think there's any extracting women's issues from government at this point. So, yeah. Thank you.